John Nesbitt wrote a book a few years back called Megatrends, and one of the megatrends was high tech, high touch, which I've always felt rings true, that the more we accelerate technological change, the greater the need for face-to-face human community and interaction. As a matter of fact, I've developed a philosophy based on this notion that if you want to create a new culture, throw a better party. And what I mean by that is that you know, the higher angels of our nature have barely been tapped in many ways, and these sources of empathy and compassion and goodness are really our basic and fundamental nature. Does that resonate with what you're
Yes, so much.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I love where you're going on that, and thank you for that. And one of the things, David mentioned that early in the book, I look at these kind of fundamentals of what makes us human. And one of the ways in which our current culture gives us this misinformation is that humans are fundamentally this kind of unique, selfish individuals. And when we actually look at what cognitive anthropologists tell us, and archaeologists tell us about how we evolved as humans, it was actually our shared community that really is our unique, and what uniquely separates humans from other primates. So, one thing that is so fascinating is even before we had language, which maybe emerged maybe a couple of 100,000 years ago, or maybe a million or so years ago, depending on how you define it. But even well before that, we had what's called mimetic culture, which means that we would share our rhythm with each other. So all the kind of facial expressions that we use to communicate with each other, the movements of our hand, all that stuff that we humans were doing way before we had language, and we had rhythm. And we'd be dancing around a campfire before anybody had ever conceived of this idea of a word or a symbolic sort of notion. And so I think that's so true that as humans, we are deeply, deeply evolved to be together in community. And when the sort of pre-human hominids first left the trees and moved into the savanna in East Africa, they actually think it was probably not even savanna, but more like changeable climate that was the biggest threat to humans. And what the ones who evolved are the ones that discovered that working together was more powerful than working separately. So other primates have the structure of this big alpha male who kind of owns the females, and the other males all hate their alpha male and they're resentful, and then they sort of try to wait for their turn so they can become the next alpha male. That's how chimpanzees work. That's how other, like gorillas work, for example. Humans began to evolve away from that structure and towards this notion of shared community so that they could actually pool their resources. So hunters would not just eat what was good for them, but bring back what they had for the community. People could gather together, and people could work together to develop tools and to defend themselves. So I think that is what fundamentally makes us humans unique, and that led to the development of these wonderful core values that we value and that we need for our society to flourish in the future. Values like compassion, empathy, altruism. Those are the things that are really our true, unique human identifiers. So yeah, thank you.
I want to just comment. You look at that in terms of the evidence of our earliest being and so forth. I want to try a little experiment here in terms of contemporary life. So how many people here, your closest friends and associates, the people you know every day, are fundamentally materialistic, self-centered, selfish, violent, destructive of nature, enjoying screwing their neighbor? Anybody?
Well, the question is, on what level are you speaking? Because the systems that we all participate in accomplish many of those things, even though in our day-to-day life we don't express that to other individuals.
That, I think, is an absolutely fundamental issue. We have designed these systems that reward us, that structure us in a ways consistent with what is best described as the psychopath. psychopathic tendencies. And many of our academic theories, particularly economic theory, is based on that, but that's not only our true nature, it's the best thing for society. I mean, that's the level of insanity of the structures that we have embraced. And one of the things that I am so excited about is, you know, I've been talking about a lot of these things for a long time, but I find that at this moment in time, and I think perhaps we can partially thank Mr. Trump, people are really ready for this conversation. They're ready to bring these things out, to discuss them, to acknowledge them, and to explore the implications for what it means for how we live in our day-to-day lives, but also how we need to organize as a civilization.